Let's take a look at jQuery plugins and the concepts around jQuery plugins. So jQuery plugins allow us to extend this idea of modularity, code abstraction, and the real intention of JavaScript is to do what HTML and CSS cannot. So let's take a look at some examples of this. First, we have our unheap.com, which is our curated lists. And look, we're already up to 998. I think we started the class at 992. jQuery itself has a lot of functionality. Now, if it had every single piece of functionality that you would want, it would be a massive library. Also, there's no one true library. As we saw earlier, there's simply just too many packages. So what I'm looking for right now is the Raptorize package. Now, some website eventually is going to need the Raptorize package, or the Raptorize plugin, excuse me. Don't be scared. So some website might need that functionality. So plugins just supply this functionality that we can't do simply with HTML and CSS. So we have all these different plugins, and all these plugins again rely on jQuery. So I want to show you some examples of this idea of modularity and add-ons and extensions. So here's the Sega Genesis, an old-time gaming console. And you can see you can buy all these different things if you need a CD player or a graphics accelerator, or if you wanted to make it backwards compatible to play old games. But you can begin to see like this idea of an add-on isn't something new. It's an idea that you're probably already familiar with. Even Trello itself, if we take a look at what's called power-ups, okay, they're just add-ons and extensions. I've already enabled the calendar extension, which gives us this functionality right here. And if I were to disable it, like, that calendar functionality goes away. So later on in Web 3, you'll see how we really leverage plugins and frameworks of extending code. Photoshop itself, not a lot of people know that there's a lot of Photoshop extensions. Photoshop is already a big program, but it can do so much more. And so I highly recommend that you look into all the different plugins for Photoshop. There are a ton of them, and you can even make your own. And you can probably guess which languages they're written in. Also, here's some more Photoshop plugins. All right, these Photoshop plugins will blow your mind. Let's take a look at some examples here. So let's say you wanted to do portraitures. Well, here's a plugin. You quickly just click and do portraitures. And here's a plugin to include Font Awesome. Plugin to do screen snaps. Let's see here. Rename layers really quickly. Where's that renaming, right? So anytime you have to do something more than once, there's probably a faster way to do it, and there's probably a plugin for it. Okay, but also like we saw with the Sega Genesis example. Okay. The downside of that is if you add on too many plugins, it begins to look like this. It's like anything in design, there are trade-offs. So we're going to be aware of the pros and cons of plugins. Coming back to this, we want to make sure that we understand this idea of plugins and they can help us. And so we're going to start here by using them right away, and then by the end of the course, we're going to be able to unpack this idea and see exactly how these plugins actually work. So to recap, this continues the ideas from Atomic Design. Okay. And jQuery plugins are absolutely and utterly dependent upon the jQuery library. Without the jQuery library, these jQuery plugins won't work. So we're going to be using plugins specifically for the jQuery library, so you could not attach a Sega Genesis extension or add-on to a Nintendo or a Gamecast or a Neo Geo. I always wanted one of these. So these jQuery plugins, all the ones from unheap.com, rely on the jQuery library and also any other jQuery plugins you might find on the internet. Now that we understand the ideas behind a jQuery plugin, let's practice with our Web 2 starter pen via CodePen and see how CodePen makes it easy to practice and experiment with jQuery plugins and code and just ideas in general. So we're going to go to CodePen and make a new pen from our Web 2 starter, which has all of our necessary code. And then we can go ahead and name this whatever we like, in this case lettering.js, and go ahead and hit save on this. Right, and then we know that we have everything we need in HTML, in our CSS, normalize, and our auto prefixer. In JavaScript, jQuery is loaded, and everything is ready to go. So now that we have that, here is our pen from class. So it has our HTML has a simple H1. We have some basic styling there, and scripts.js is blank. So then we're going to go ahead and open this thing in debug view. And first off, we're going to just run the console and make sure there's no errors, right? Just simply no errors. Okay, that's the first place to start. And I want to create an explicit error, right? So right now we're going to say jQuery wake up, right? $ left paren right paren, and go get me the H1 semicolon, which ends the statement. Okay. And if we run this, right, we again see no errors. But if we went in here and temporarily deleted jQuery, so let's pretend that we forgot to add jQuery, like oops, we made a mistake. But we remove jQuery from our pen, and then we're going to run this exact same code, and as soon as I run it, you can see here that says uncaught reference, which is the computer's way of saying jQuery, the $, is not defined. It's basically not found because the $, isn't a part of vanilla JavaScript or the native JavaScript or the original JavaScript, or basically what jQuery becomes is JavaScript, and we basically have removed that layer and saying this layer does not exist. This thing that you typed, this $, isn't there. And that's the first place to start. We need to make sure everything is in place before we start experimenting with it. So now if I come back here and apply jQuery and do that, we see that jQuery is indeed there. So now we need to ask ourselves, if we can't do something with HTML and CSS, can JavaScript do that? So a really good example of this is rounded corners. So for a long time on the web, we didn't have rounded corners. But you're saying, well, that's kind of weird because I can do that right now very, very easily. So background red, give it a width of whatever, 50%. And what's it, border dash radius, and whatever border radius you want, 10 pixels. You can even give it a percentage here. Make it 50%. It's going to try to look like an oval. Okay. So you're like, well, yes, we can. Well, not really, because for a very, very long time, we didn't have any of this on the web. We had to use jQuery plugins to have rounded corners like this. Well, here's one of the plugins. And so you can see here, here's some rounded corner and some other neat corners. And now all this can be done with CSS. So that's the first place to look at. And here's Unheap's collection of rounded corners. So again, the whole point of jQuery is it's not supposed to exist. Again, in an ideal world, jQuery shouldn't have to exist. We should be able to do everything with HTML and CSS. But until that day comes, right, we're going to need jQuery for certain things and JavaScript for certain things. So the first thing that we're going to need this thing to do here is this idea of kerning, right? We can't kern on the web. We can only have a letter spacing, which letter spacing is about equivalent to tracking. Okay, so that's all we can do. We can only track on the web, right? So we want to be able to move each character individually. Also, we want to be able to change this word here to whatever we like. So maybe web design or some really long word like photosynthesis. Okay, if I spelled that right. Okay, and it should be able to count that, because what we want to be able to do is move each individual characters without having to come in here and type span for an inline element and put a P, and then do the same thing here, span, and put an H. Also, this reduces our search engine quality, because Google thinks each one of these characters is important because we've wrapped each one in an individual span. So other than being tedious, right, there are some other added benefits to this. Okay, so those are the things that we need. Okay, just like we needed rounded corners. So there's a plugin for this. So Dave Rupert made this plugin called Lettering, and each one of these has a way to wrap each letter by itself, okay, in an individual span, and then give you a hook. So character 1, character 2, so char 1, char 3, char 5, okay, and just wrap every single character for you. And if you change the words, it's going to count the letters, okay, because humans aren't good at counting, and take care of the tedious task of wrapping it in a span and the tedious task of wrapping it in a character hook. And so then here's the plugin for this. So here's the selling of the plugin. So like, hey, everybody use my plugin because it's the best. And here is the code to actually make it happen. So the first place to start is make sure that you have another debug window open here and make sure that you're no console errors. So we need this code, all right? So we're sold. Like, all right, Dave Rupert, we like your plugin, so we're gonna use it. So we're gonna go get this code, and common convention for jQuery plugins is jQuery.thename-of-the-plugin.js. So here's the plugin. Now we don't want the path to the page that has the plugin or the URL to the page that contains the code. We just want the code itself. So we can download the file, but we're not doing that yet. To do that, we're just going to simply hit the raw button and get this raw code, and we can Command A and copy that. And what we want to do is put that code right here, but we can't just paste all that code in there because otherwise we're going to get this error. So really this spot right here is the path to another jQuery, to another piece of JavaScript. In this case, that piece of JavaScript is a jQuery plugin. So to do that, we're going to make a new pen on CodePen, and this is going to be just a JavaScript pen. Nothing else, just a JavaScript pen. So this is going to be our lettering plugin. Okay. So we don't need any HTML for this. We don't need any CSS. We just need JavaScript for this. Okay. And then we can hit save on this, and it's going to give us a path to the plugin right there. So if we copy that path to the plugin without any of the question mark queries, okay, again, we had a long lecture about what's before and after the question mark. Basically, watch what happens when you change one of these panels, right? You're changing the page, and therefore you're changing the URL. And so what we want is just the path to the pen itself. So we're going to grab that, and we're going to paste it right into here, okay, and hit save. And what we've done is we've added the lettering plugin. Okay. So now that we've added the plugin is installed. We need to activate it. Again, we can't activate it until it's installed. Okay. So don't make that mistake. I haven't touched a single bit of code. I haven't even looked at the documentation until the plugin is installed. Get the plugin installed first. All right, so going through our panels, so do we need some HTML? Yes. Do we already have some there? Yes. So do we need this? No. Then we're going to go into our CSS. Do we have CSS already there? Yes. So now we're going to take a look at the JavaScript. So we take a look at the JavaScript. Well, we see here that this is the script element, and it has some JavaScript. So just like in CSS where this said style instead of script, right? This would all be CSS. So if this said style, this would be CSS. But this is script, and this is all JavaScript. So we know that the angled brackets and forward slashes are HTML, so we don't need these two things in green. We've never addressed what this is. Okay, long story short, we're not going to worry about it in Web 2. But we have addressed selector action option. In this case, jQuery wake up, go find the class of fancy title, and apply this action called lettering. Again, an action is a method. All right. So let's do that same thing, right? So that's all the code that we need right there. Okay, and since we're icing on the cake, we want to do just that. So jQuery wake up, what's this thing that I want to letter? In this case, the H1. And what do I want to do to the H1? I want to apply this action of lettering, just like we can have here real quick. We can hide it. Okay, and if we save it, there it's hidden, right? We're applying the action of hide. In this case, we're applying the action of lettering. Okay. And you might think, well, nothing happened. So let's go take a look at our debug page and inspect it. And indeed, it has counted all the characters for us. And again, the value of this plugin is if we change these words to whatever, okay, it's going to go ahead and count all these letters for us and wrap them up in individual characters. So that is very, very handy. It's doing all that dynamically. And now that we have lettering.js working, okay, we can see some of the other shortcuts inside of CodePen. So the first one is it's grabbing every single piece of content from here. So, but we only want the JavaScript for this one. So shortcut number 1 is we can go back to the plugin pen. What we can do here is, instead of getting me all 3 panels, so this basically says get me all the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript and add it to my page. But if you just want the JS, you simply at the end of the pen go .js and you have all the JavaScript. And if you wanted just the HTML, so here's some HTML content. If you just wanted HTML content, you can go .html and there's just the HTML content. So again, this is applying that concept of content delivery networks. We're pulling content in from an external source. So that's shortcut number 1. Shortcut number 2 is if it's a popular plugin, right? That plugin will show up here in the pull down. So I'm going to remove the URL to our plugin pen. So here's our plugin pen. I'm going to remove that URL for a second. And then I'm going to simply type lettering. Okay, and there's the other big shortcut. Now we can just click on this and we have access to the, let's see how many plugins and add-ons and packages that and libraries that CodePen supports. In this case, it's about 2,700 different plugins and libraries. And so we go back to our pen and we see, wow, that's pretty quick, because now we don't have to create an external pen. So for most popular plugins, they may exist. So for our weather one, our simple weather plugin we're going to use later on in the quarter, we see that it is indeed right there. It'll save us the work of going out and getting that code and creating a pen and then linking up the pen, right? And but if you look for the Colin plugin, you see here there's no Colin plugin. So we're going to need to make a pen for that one. So CodePen makes it easy by giving you all the popular pens, but it also gives you a way to put in pens that either aren't hosted somewhere else or just aren't that popular. What are some applications of CodePen? The first is you can take a look at the home page, and basically it's a place to promote your work, a place to see other people's work. So on the CodePen homepage, and also the CodePen, where'd it go? There is a CodePen patterns. Let's see here. It's codepen.io/patterns. We'll give you a list of patterns. There it is. These are all the design patterns, right? Notice again a collection of patterns following our atomic design principles from Brad Frost. So if you want to pen on a bunch of accordions, well, here you go. Right? Many different ways to do the same thing. Also, CodePens can be embedded directly into a website. So the website you made from Web 1 or any future website you make. So here's CSS Tricks, Chris Coyer's website and blog. And here all the code there and his code samples you can edit on CodePen. So here's the result, here is the Sass for it, and here is the Haml for it. Okay. And if we click on edit on CodePen, we can go directly to that pen and get the code for it as soon as it's done loading. Here's another website. This is a past reference from Web 2 and Web 1, where I said you wanted to learn about setting background colors and gradients. So you're reading through the article and you realize I would like to see a demo of this because it's just showing code snippets. So here's a code snippet above. Well, now you can go and see that. So here's HTML and CSS, and again you can click on edit on CodePen. And I guess this pen is not loading, but there it is. There's that particle explosion. So here is the CodePen pen, and we can go and view compiled HTML and view compiled CSS, and we get to see the results of that abstraction. And the same thing here, we're directly going from the website that has the demo to the pen itself. So CodePen has a lot of features. So I suggest that you take some time. This is just scratching the surface of all the stuff that you can do on CodePen.